Good morning, students. Mr. Cohen here. Today, what we're going to look at, we're going to be learning about the geography and the settlement of Greece, not just the settlement of the main part of Greece, the mainland of Greece, but also the settlement of other areas around the Mediterranean Sea and the Black Sea. The geography of Greece was such that the landscape did not provide them with enough resources. And so we're going to look at how travel helped them, and establishing what we call colonies elsewhere helped them too. After you've watched this video, I have set up a reading check for you in the quizzes section of Canvas, and you've got a reading in there and with a series of questions to answer after watching this video, and I wish you the best of luck. This PowerPoint is actually a condensed version of the chapter reading that we have from our class textbook, which I will also be sharing with you. So let's get started. So here we see, just looking at this first slide, we can see that Greece has a rocky landscape. You can see that here in the background of this Greek village. Greek Orthodox Church is here. And here we see the Doric columns. These are called Doric columns, this style of column with the plain top, what we call a capital or top of the column. It's very plain. It's not carved intricately like some of the other columns. These would have been hand carved. And these columns would not be carved in one long piece. They'd be like little cogs set on top of each other and pinned together. So they would have been like a big kind of discs that were set on top of each other. And the ancient Greeks were very good with designing buildings and also with math. A lot of math would have gone into designing these buildings. So let's move ahead. Okay, introduction. Geography of Greece. The mainland of Greece, which is this area here, rather than these islands. When we're talking about the mainland of Greece, we're talking about the main area here. Okay. By the way, this is not an island here. This area is a peninsula because it is joined here. Greece itself is a peninsula, and that means it's touched on three sides by water, by the sea. Okay, you got this side on the west, this side on the south, and this side on the east. And this is the Mediterranean Sea here. Now, little corners of the Mediterranean Sea might have other names, might be called, they are called other names. So the Aegean Sea, which is on this side of Greece. We also have the Adriatic Sea on this side. But basically, these are all corners of the Mediterranean Sea. Like I said, steep rocky mountains are a feature of Greece and its islands. And the blue seas I showed you in the video the other day, very blue, beautiful colours. And when you go on to the Greek islands and you're heading from the mainland to some of these islands, you notice straight away as you head further out how the water turns this really deep, dark blue. It's a beautiful colour. And it's like the colour of the blue on their flag. The flag is as a blue background with white stripes and a white cross in the corner. And the white cross represents that Greece is also a Christian country. They do follow a different type of Christianity. It's called Greek Orthodox, different than, say, Catholic or Protestant types of Christianity. So the geography definitely influenced the way the Greeks lived. Cities and villages were isolated, cut off from one another. They didn't have major highways, didn't have trains or planes to get about, and it was kind of dangerous sometimes traveling. So, rocky hillsides, people could fall off. They could be attacked by bandits. But they did need to trade. Trading was necessary because they had very little good farmland. And you can see that even today in many parts of Greece. Look at this. I mean, this land is difficult to farm. The soil is poor. One thing you do notice, though, when you're in Greece, you'll notice a lot of herbs that we buy in the store are grown on these hillsides. the herbs can grow in poor soil. Look at the colour of that water, that turquoise blue. It's beautiful, isn't it? Now, in that previous picture, you would have noticed the sea. So the sea is going to provide them an opportunity to travel and to trade, because the high mountains are making travel very difficult. People walked or rode in carts, pulled by oxen. Sometimes there were sharp rocks that shattered the wooden wheels. People sometimes travelled in groups, moving slowly, risk of being attacked by bandits. Now, travelling by boat was easier. Travelling by boat was definitely easier, but it also had its own dangers. Let's look at these dangers. Could be attacked by pirates. Aye, Jim lad. Okay, no, not the pirates that you see in the movies. You know, these weren't like English pirates. These are pirates that were around the Mediterranean Sea. Basically just people that were criminals trying to steal things from other people travelling by sea. And a lot of trade items were travelling on those ships, so the pirates knew that if they attacked a ship, they had the opportunity to steal something that was worth value. The greatest danger, though, was the sea itself. So becoming shipwrecked because of storms, rocky coastlines. And so the ancient Greeks, who were quite superstitious, they had the gods for nature, and Poseidon was the god of the sea, Poseidon, and they would make sacrifices to Poseidon before sailing. Greeks and many people of earlier times could not understand some of the events in nature like thunder and lightning, so they would have gods to pray to or sacrifice to, in the hope that they could avoid being harmed by things going on in nature, such as earthquakes and thunderstorms and so on. Farming wasn't easy in Greece. Now, some of you students might have been to a Greek restaurant. Think of what goes in a Greek salad. If you've been to a Greek restaurant and you've had a Greek salad, you might remember in a Greek salad there is feta cheese. Feta cheese was traditionally made from goat or sheep milk, not cow milk. Yesterday when I showed you a video, I mentioned the landscape and I said that the land was rocky. Would cows be able to live on that kind of landscape? No, it'd be very difficult. Cows need grass, plenty of it, and they don't really like running up and down mountains, right? Okay, what animal does? Well, goats. And they provided meat, milk and cheese. Goats and skins and wool. If there were goats or sheep, they could get skins or wool for clothing. Another thing in a Greek salad, olives. Olives can grow pretty well in rocky soil that's not really that fertile. And so we see those foods used in Greek salads today. You'll also see tomatoes in a Greek salad, but tomatoes did not exist in Europe at that time. They were only found in the Americas at that time. But olives and goat cheese were produced in ancient times in Greece because of the landscape. Land was rocky. Water in the mountains was scarce, not much of it. Like I said about California, many parts of Greece, the weather is similar to Southern California. Not much rain in the summer, very little, but in the winter months it'd have a little bit of it. The other thing, no major rivers flow through Greece. Just small rivers and streams, but no major rivers flow through Greece. So it's difficult to farm. They had to build steps or terraces into the mountains to create flat land to grow crops. So those steps would help the water, the little bit of rainfall that did fall would stay in those flat areas longer than just sliding down the mountain. So they'd build steps or terraces into the mountains to create flat land to grow crops. It's also easier to farm on the flat land. Crops that were grown: wheat, and that should say barley, that's a typo, so Barley rather than Brayley. Okay. Grapes were grown. Grapes still are grown, and grapes could also be turned into wine. And Greece still produces grapes and olives in large quantities. Olive oil you can find in supermarkets here that's actually exported or sent out from Greece today. Olives. And olives could be made into all kinds of things. They could be just eaten as olives, turned into olive oil, which could be used in cooking. They also used it for skincare. Even today you can buy soap made with olive oil. And it's a major trade item. They produced so much of it that they could trade it for things that they wanted or needed from elsewhere. Here you see an example of the rocky landscape. Okay, even today you'll see like old houses like this on the hillsides. Sometimes they'll have their animals living in them. But you could see a cow could not survive on this landscape, right? This could be an olive tree here. That looks like one by the shape of things. But you're not seeing them growing corn here. Corn did not exist in Europe at this time anyway. It came from the Americas. But this would be hard to grow crops on. So the animals they raised, like I said, sheep and goats. Like I said, they provided wool for clothing from the sheep, and goats provided milk and cheese. Oxen, mules and donkeys for ploughing and transportation. And if they're going over those rocky mountains, mules would be very helpful, okay, on that rocky landscape. The shortage of good farmland, though, sometimes led to wars between Greek settlements because they're coming so close to each other, right? And so they're coming into contact with each other and they're competing for the small amounts of land that are good for farming. And so they decide that they're going to create settlements or colonies elsewhere. They're forced to look beyond the mainland, from out of the main part of Greece, for new sources of food and other goods. So they're going to be going to other places where maybe they can produce things that they can't produce on the mainland, and also trade them back to the mainland, the main parts of Greece. So colonies, they're settlements in distant places. So for example, the United States started off as the 13 colonies established by the English. The English started 13 colonies several thousand miles away from England, here in the Americas. It's a colony is a settlement in a distant place from where the people left from. People in the colonies are called colonists. And these people were sent to distant places to grow food and send it back to the mainland in Greece. Many preparations had to be made. They'd ask gods for the trip to be successful, and they'd meet with a holy person, usually a woman, called an oracle, who would communicate with the gods. The ancient Greeks believed the oracle could see into the future and could communicate with their gods. They would also gather food and supplies, and then they would also take a flame. They considered this a sacred or holy flame to start a fire in their new home. This was like their tradition, taking that flame from their town, their hometown, to their new colony that they've established elsewhere. Now, it wasn't easy. Okay, they didn't have fancy cruise ships, right? Wooden ships, sailing ships. It's a long sea voyage, would take time, and they would have to find good farmland with natural harbours so they could actually tie up their ships without them being shipwrecked on rocks. And the third thing, they definitely avoid places that had local people who did not want to share their land. They wanted to avoid wars. So Over 300 years, they established colonies. They created settlements in places like Ionia in Asia Minor, which is today modern Turkey. So they would be heading east to what is today modern Turkey. They also headed west to Spain, slightly northwest to France, west to Italy, across the Adriatic Sea to Italy, and also south to Africa. So, for example, in Africa today, in Egypt, in northern Africa, you have a city called Alexandria, and it's named after a famous Greek, Alexander the Great. And many Greeks settled there. So these areas of Europe and northern Africa and parts of Asia, modern Turkey, were settled by the Greeks. They did not go as far north as places like Germany and England and establish colonies there. They were fine settling in these areas. So what kind of goods did they trade? They needed grain and they needed timber, especially for building ships and houses, and metals. So metals could be used for tools, for weapons, maybe for parts on ships and so on. And they would, whatever they produced too much of, they would trade for goods that they wanted or needed from elsewhere. Ships were owned by merchants, people buying and selling things, a person who makes money selling goods. And we'll find today there are many ships that are a shipwreck, should I say, found on the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea that will reveal some of the trade items in these merchants' ships. We'll get to look at a picture in a moment. Navigating ships was also difficult because the people didn't have compasses. They navigated or steered their ships by using the stars, positions of the stars. Like other ancient peoples, they'd use the stars to help them travel at night. No lighthouses, so made it difficult to see rocky shorelines. They could become shipwrecked. No lighthouses. Later, there were some lighthouses built later, but very few were around at this time. And so, despite these dangers, trade did flourish or do very well along the Mediterranean coast. Mediterranean coast was known for being a great trading region. They all had something in common. They traded in this region, this area. Here we see the remains of a Greek ship, and archaeologists, people that dig up the past to reveal history, are finding many ships and many artifacts or items, historical items, on the seabed. And sometimes they'll find containers, they look like giant vases, they're called amphora, full of oil or wine from a couple of thousand years ago. This one is from the Sicilian coast. Sicily is a large island off the southern coast of Italy, and the Greeks did have colonies there. Okay, this was a merchant ship that you just looked at, and they were called mercantile sailors. Mercantile means to do with the sea and merchants. We often, well, not necessarily, well, mercantile sailors to do with the sea. Mercantile means to do with merchants buying and selling things. Probably used to sail short distance along the coastline. Several artifacts or historical items have been recovered, including oil lamps, pottery, and straw baskets. Archaeologists believe that the ship encountered a storm, so it went into a storm in which the ship tilted and the ballast broke the hull. The heavy things in the ship to keep it stable broke the hull, sending it to the seabed. So look how easy things could happen. Just the ship tilting ended up with it being shipwrecked. This discovery has excited many archaeologists, people that dig up the past, to tell us about what was going on then. And it is thought to be the missing link in naval engineering. And so it's given historians some kind of indication of what was taking place at a certain time in history in naval engineering, in the building and the design of ships for the navies. The wooden planks of the hull of the ship have been found to be sewn together. They've sewn them together with ropes, and then they've sealed them with pitch and resin from trees, like tree sap, used as a form of sealant to keep out water. And this technique is slightly different from those used later. The Greek wreck will be transported to Portsmouth in England, which is also a big naval area, and where it will be restored before returning to Gala in Greece, where it is hoped to be put in a museum. Actually, Gala maybe is Sicily rather than Greece. So in summary, you learned how the Greeks settled in isolated communities cut off from one another because of their country's mountainous geography. You also learned that most Greeks survived by farming, but good farmland was scarce or not much of it. So the Greeks took to the seas, creating colonies and trading with other peoples elsewhere. In the next chapter, you will see how the isolated communities of ancient Greece developed their own customs, including different forms of government. Now, students, after watching this video, I'm going to put a link in the announcement too for you to do a reading check. There's a small amount of reading and about 10 questions worth of credit for you to work on. Okay, wish you all the best. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for your attention. Oh, one other thing. If you have any assignments that are still open, please let me know when you have finished them. It's important you email me to let me know you finished that late work. Okay, thank you very much. Bye now.